Usually when we talk about keeping a personal journal, there is this underlying assumption of emotional venting.
Right, yeah, like a teenager's diary.
Exactly. Like you write down how you feel or who annoyed you that day, and you pour out all that messy subjectivity, and then you just kind of close the book to keep it safe from the chaos of the outside world.
Yeah, and that catharsis is exactly what most of us are trained to look for in a diary, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, it's a psychological release valve.
It is, yeah. But that subjective approach entirely changes when you step into the world of a veteran software developer who is documenting his own life.
Because suddenly that messy emotional diary is just, well, it's gone.
It's completely gone. Instead, we are looking at a biological and psychological landscape that is treated quite literally like a complex operating system.
Which is fascinating.
It really is. And that is exactly what we found in a weekly review published just 2 days ago on March 22, 2026. So the blog is called kencrnmem.org, and the post is titled This Week in Review for Week 12 of 2026. It's written by a veteran developer named Ang, who humbly refers to himself as an old software plumber.
I love that. Software plumber is such a, a telling phrase. It implies someone who isn't just chasing the shiny new trends, but someone who really understands the underlying pipes,
Yeah.
the structural pressure, and those intricate systems that keep a massive infrastructure flowing smoothly.
And what makes this document so compelling is how he applies that exact same engineering mindset to his own existence.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if you are someone trying to balance a demanding career, your physical health, and endless curiosities without feeling completely crushed by the modern world, Ang's approach is basically a masterclass in survival.
It really is.
So today we are doing a deep dive into the anatomy of a hyper-documented, multidisciplinary life. We are going to see how a highly analytical mind survives an increasingly automated world.
And how he meticulously debugs his own physical body, too.
Yes. Plus, we'll get into a profound silent shift in the software industry that is pushing him towards some intensely niche analog hobbies.
It's just a brilliant cross-section of what it means to be a human being navigating the technological realities of 2026.
Totally. So let's start with his health and wellness section, because this obsession with controlling his physical inputs makes total sense when we look at his hardware, meaning his actual body.
Right. The Week 12 review is just wild when it comes to the metrics.
It is. He doesn't just write, oh, I slept poorly this week. No, he notes an exact 6.7-hour average of daily sleep.
Down to the decimal.
Down to the decimal. He tracks his physical movement to the single digit, 5,365 steps. He tracks his weight, again, to the decimal point, 68.93 kilograms.
Wow.
And he even documents his daily diet ratio as 2:1:11 or 2:21.
Right. And for those who might be unfamiliar with that shorthand, the 2-1-1 ratio is this methodical way of partitioning a plate.
How does that work exactly?
So it's 2 parts vegetables, 1 part protein, and 1 part carbohydrates.
Mm.
And he mentioned sometimes he shifts it to 2-2-1, basically upping the protein. It is a completely modular approach to human nutrition.
It's like he is treating his biological body with the exact same precision he uses to isolate a bug in a line of code.
Yes, exactly.
But I have to push back a little here because I think a lot of people listening might feel their chest tighten just hearing those numbers.
Oh, for sure.
Like, is tracking every single variable, exact diet ratios, decimal point weight, single-digit step counts, is that actually freeing? Or does it risk becoming an exhausting second full-time job?
Well, that is the natural reaction, right?
Right.
Because most of us attach heavy moral baggage to our metrics.
We really do.
When the average person steps on a scale and sees their weight go up or, realizes they didn't hit their step goal, it becomes a moral failing. We say, oh, I was bad this week, or I am so lazy.
Guilt. It's all guilt.
Exactly. But the secret to Ang's hyperdocumentation is the sheer absence of judgment.
Interesting.
Yeah, he observes the data, 68.93 kilograms. He doesn't panic. He simply analyzes the variables that cause the output.
So it's purely diagnostic.
Entirely diagnostic. He notes that the slight weight increase is likely contributed by a relapsed inflammation, poor sleep quality from a recent heat wave, and an increase in outside food intake.
So it's just cause and effect.
Right. By externalizing the data, he doesn't have to rely on his flawed human memory or his daily mood to know how he is doing.
That makes the troubleshooting so methodical. For example, he experienced that intense heat wave, and he also drank coffee late at night, which negatively impacted his sleep architecture.
And his prescription isn't a vague promise to try harder tomorrow.
No, he applies a specific mechanical intervention, He uses a heat pad treatment after a massaging session,
Right.
which he tracks, and he notices it significantly reduced the time it took to fall asleep. And logically, he patches the other bug by just cutting the late-night coffee.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And he does the same thing with his physical injuries, too.
Oh, right, the walking thing.
Yeah, he mentions experiencing a relapse of inflammation because of a side effect from a specific supplement he was taking. And this flare-up, combined with some knee pain from an old sports injury and a muscle imbalance, means his regular swimming routine is suddenly a huge risk.
So what does he do?
Well, instead of forcing the issue and breaking the system further, he gracefully degrades his routine. He pivots to a conservative approach, sticking to walking around the neighborhood for groceries and doing daily chores to allow for active recovery.
But the system is only as good as its adaptability, right? Because those numbers, the 2-1-1 diets and the exact step counts, they seem incredibly rigid at first glance.
You do, yeah. Until you look at how he handles failure or fatigue. Take his approach to meditation this week.
Right, the micro sessions.
Exactly. Normally, he has a strict dedicated block of 1 to 2 minutes of sitting meditation. But because he was physically exhausted and the humidity from the heat wave was draining his cognitive energy, that rigid block became too heavy of a lift.
Which happens to all of us.
Right. But instead of abandoning the practice entirely, he completely redesigned the deployment. He shifted to micro sessions spread throughout the day.
And the brilliant part is how he implements those micro sessions. He anchors them to existing daily actions.
Yes.
Like he does a micro session right before and after a meal, or taking a single mindful breath right after he finishes a drink of water.
Behavioral anchoring is one of the most powerful psychological tools we have. You don't have to remember to meditate.
You just have to remember that placing your empty water glass on the desk is the physical trigger to take a breath.
Exactly.
It's like drafting behind a semi-truck on the highway. You let the massive existing habit drinking water, eating lunch do all the aerodynamic heavy lifting, and the new fragile habit of meditation just slips in right behind it without requiring extra cognitive fuel.
That's a great analogy.
Think about your own morning routine for a second if you're listening. What is a rigid, automatic habit you already do that you could use as an anchor today?
That is exactly how you bypass decision fatigue. I mean, you don't need to track your way to the decimal point to benefit from this mindset. You just need to build systems that run smoothly in the background, requiring as little willpower as possible.
Which is so crucial because this meticulous control over his physical inputs makes total sense when you realize how much control is currently dissolving in his professional life.
Yeah, the contrast is stark.
While Aang is brilliantly optimizing his physical hardware, he is simultaneously navigating a profound, honestly somewhat melancholic, shift in his digital software world.
Which brings us to his coding environment.
Yes. So in his projects and hobbies section, we get a glimpse of just how technical this guy is. He is actively submitting pull requests for incredibly complex programming languages. We're talking Go, Python, Elixir, Erlang, Rust, and Haskell.
That is a serious stack.
Right. He specifically mentions updating the GitHub continuous integration for Elixir dependencies for an upcoming Erlang OTP 28 release.
And just to give some context for anyone outside the software engineering world, continuous integration, or CI, is essentially the automated safety net for a code base.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
When a developer writes new code, the CI pipeline automatically tests it to ensure it doesn't break the existing software before it goes live. So updating those dependencies for a new release of a massive language like Erlang requires intense human precision. It is highly collaborative, high-stakes plumbing.
But then he drops this massive paradigm-shifting observation. He notes that he is actively struggling to find interesting open-source projects to contribute to on GitHub.
Which is huge.
It is. Now, historically, GitHub has been built on the friction of human review. It is the digital town square. You submit a pull request, someone critiques your logic, you debate, you learn. But Aang says he can't find these collaborative projects anymore because of the sheer prevalence of AI and large language models.
Yeah, he explicitly writes that the increased usage of AI among developers has drastically reduced the need for human-to-human collaboration.
Which is a little sad.
It's very sad. Developers aren't partnering with each other to solve problems anymore. They're partnering with the machine.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If an AI can spot a syntax error or solve a complicated bug in 3 seconds,
Right.
whereas a human community might take 3 days of back and forth on a message board, isn't that efficiency a good thing? Why is the loss of this social friction inherently bad?
Well, it is fantastic for efficiency, sure, but it is devastating for mentorship, and community resilience.
How so?
Think about what open source software, or FLAWless, Free Libre and open source software as he calls it,
Yep.
what that has meant for the last 2 decades. It wasn't just about getting the code written, it was an ecosystem.
Right, people learning from each other.
Exactly. You had junior developers cutting their teeth by submitting flawed code, and senior developers taking the time to explain why it was flawed. That social friction is where knowledge transfer actually happens.
Oh, wow. So the friction wasn't a bug, the friction was the feature that built the community.
Precisely. And for a veteran blogger like Ang, who has a massive 15-year blog archive documenting his open source journey week by week since 2011, this is a heavy realization.
Yeah, 15 years is a long time to watch a community grow and then just fade.
He is watching the digital town square empty out. He explicitly foresees that social collaboration among developers will reduce significantly in the future. The friction of coding is being completely smoothed over by AI, but that friction was the only reason humans needed to talk to each other in that space.
If an old software plumber who has dedicated years of his life to this ecosystem is saying the human community is quietly disappearing, it forces us to look at our own lives.
Absolutely.
Like, I'd encourage you, the listener, to reflect on your own industry right now. How is artificial intelligence silently changing the social fabric of your daily work?
That's the real question.
Are the casual mentorship opportunities, those messy human-to-human problem-solving sessions by the whiteboard, slowly being replaced by a sterile prompt box?
What Ang is experiencing on GitHub is simply a microcosm of a much larger societal shift. We're trading human connection for frictionless output. But as we know, human beings are biological creatures. We are not wired for total frictionless isolation.
Which is the perfect bridge to the third part of his week, and honestly, the most fascinating juxtaposition in this entire document.
Hobbies.
The hobbies. When the digital world becomes too automated, too fast, and too lonely, a highly analytical mind has to seek friction elsewhere. And Ang finds it in a deeply messy, tangible, analog antidote.
His hobbies are incredibly intense.
They are. To balance out the screen time and the AI isolation, Ang dives into highly specific hands-on activities. Let's talk about his fish keeping.
Oh, this is amazing.
He isn't just, dropping a plastic castle into a bowl with a goldfish. He is actively acclimating a challenging species of polygamous mouth-brooding cichlids.
And the biology of mouth brooding is intense all on its own.
Wait, explain that because it sounds crazy.
Oh, it is. For those who don't know, a mouth-brooding fish literally carries its fertilized eggs and eventually the hatched fry inside its own mouth for weeks to protect them from predators.
That is wild.
Yeah, and the parent often doesn't eat during this entire period.
Yeah.
It is a massive biological sacrifice just to ensure the next generation survives.
It is the ultimate anti-automation. And he's also carefully priming pairs of a different species, Apistogramma cichlids. He notes that he's introducing sponge filters and air stones to these aquarium tanks.
Right, to increase the oxygen.
Exactly. He read that increasing the oxygenated air and water flow helps induce breeding.
The mechanism there is fascinating, by the way. By adding those air stones and sponge filters, he's artificially simulating the rainy season of the Amazon River.
Wow.
Yeah, in the wild, the influx of fresh, highly oxygenated rainwater tells the fish biologically that the environment is rich and it is a safe time to reproduce.
See, you cannot prompt an Apistogramma cichlid to breed. In his software world, Ang gives an LLM a command and gets an instant frictionless result. But in his living room, he can only carefully, patiently manipulate the environment.
Exact.
He adds a sponge filter, he simulates the Amazonian rain, he waits, he observes. It requires a completely different part of the human brain.
Because the analog world provides exactly what the AI world is stripping away.
Yeah.
Tangibility, patience, and direct, undeniable physical feedback.
Right.
When you write code with an LLM, the machine does the heavy lifting inside a black box. You don't see the gears turning, but the physical world demands your participation.
And it goes beyond the fish tanks, too. He is also gardening, he's germinating seeds, pulling weeds by hand, watering plants.
Real physical labor.
Yeah. When you pull a weed from the dirt, you feel the physical resistance of the roots snapping. When you wait for a seed to germinate, you are forced to submit to the natural, unchangeable timeline of biology.
Right.
You can't write a script to make a seed grow faster. It is the ultimate resistance to optimization.
Notice how different his approach is here compared to his physical health or his coding.
Oh, that's true.
With his body, he is debugging a machine. With his software, he is optimizing a system. But with his garden and his fish, he isn't forcing efficiency. He is cultivating an environment. He is allowing things to be slow.
Even his approach to home improvement reflects this. He mentions pending grout work on the tile in his front yard balcony and installing curtains. These are deeply tactile, physical realities.
Very hands-on.
And he has this beautifully simple, almost radical rule for his living space: decluttering exactly one item per day.
Not an entire room.
No, not a massive weekend overhaul, just one physical item every single day.
That is the necessary balance. When your professional life is hyper-analytical and increasingly isolated by digital automation, you desperately need physical friction to remind you that you are a biological creature. You need messy, slow realities to ground you.
I think there is a profound challenge in that for everyone listening. Like, when was the last time you nurtured something in the physical world that completely resisted being sped up by technology?
Right.
Something that demanded your patience rather than rewarding your productivity.
It is a vital question for the next decade. Being well-informed isn't just about reading the news or understanding how the latest large language model works. True insight comes from observing how individuals adapt their lives to survive these massive technological shifts.
Exactly. And in this deep dive, we've unpacked an incredible breadth of survival tactics packed into one ordinary week.
You really have.
From using heat pads and the aerodynamic momentum of micromeditations to debug the physical body, to mourning the quiet loss of human connection and mentorship on GitHub,
Yeah.
and then finding solace in simulating the Amazonian rainy season in a quiet living room fish tank.
You might not need to update Erlang dependencies, and you might never breed cichlids, but finding your own equilibrium between the hyper-analytical digital world and the deeply natural physical world is the blueprint for modern resilience.
It really is.
It is about knowing when to ruthlessly optimize the system and when to step back and just let the system breathe.
Which brings us to one final thought to leave you with today. We mentioned earlier that Aang has a massive 15-year blog archive. Since 2011, he has been meticulously documenting his code, his gardening, his fish spawns, his diet, week after week, year after year.
Which is incredible.
It is a monumental, handcrafted digital footprint.
A literal timeline of a human mind adapting to the 21st century.
Now, think about the reality of 2026.
Mhm.
We are living in an era where an AI can generate 1,000 perfectly formatted, highly informative blog posts in a single second. It can simulate a journal entry instantly.
Yeah, effortlessly.
So, in a world absolutely flooded with instant, frictionless, synthetic content, what is the true, enduring value of a purely human, painstakingly handcrafted record of one ordinary week?
That's the million-dollar question.
When you look back at your own logs, whether they are emotional teenage diaries or hyper-documented operating systems, will your digital footprint be a testament to your messy, patient, beautiful humanity? Or will it just be more training data for the machine?
That is definitely something worth meditating on. Perhaps you can anchor that thought to your next micro session.
Just remember to finish your drink of water first. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.